Well, hey, thank you for coming on the show, Gonzalo.
No, thank you. I really appreciate your invitation, Clint.
Of course. So I want to talk to you about all sorts of things, but I think to start, why don't we talk about why Utah is important to you, why you've stayed in Utah, your history with Utah, just to kind of give us a baseline of, because you work on a lot of interesting things, which we're going to talk about. And I think the why behind that is really interesting.
And I appreciate that. So I'm originally from Venezuela, and Gen Xer from Venezuela. My dad was a musician. I always wanted to pursue music, and I thought that was going to be, my destiny. I'm a Latter-day Saint. After I served a mission, I could not go back to school of music, nor to my career in economics. But I had the chance to come to Utah Valley State College.
Yeah.
So that kind of shows how I am.
I remember UVSC, man.
UVSC, I loved it, man.
Yeah.
I really love it. And a big shout out to Astrid Tuminez, go Wolverines. So once I started studying business in Utah Valley, I kind of, a new world was open for me, to be honest. So in Venezuela, I wasn't going to meet people from Africa or Mongolia or Japan. That I had the chance to do in Utah Valley. And that's something I was very grateful for, because I felt welcome, to be honest.
Oh, yeah.
And in Utah County, for the most part, had been welcoming. I was able to stay here thanks to a private citizen who decided to become my sponsor.
Interesting.
I never used funds from the state or a scholarship. That private citizen decided to be my sponsor. Yes, I'll pay for the rest of your education. You just please pay it forward, which I've been able to do. So that sponsor passed away during the COVID crisis.
I'm sorry.
Her name was Lorraine McGuire, and I always going to be grateful for that help.
How did you meet her?
One of her daughters, Erin McGuire, who teaches in high school here in Utah County. She's a good friend of mine. Is one of the greatest people I ever met. Coincidentally, after 98, I had to go back to Venezuela because I ran out of money. But I work in a company that flew me back to Provo for a training. And I visited my old church friends, and that friend said to me, like, what would it take to bring you back to the States? Well, on the one hand, I'm trying to find a work visa in this company, and the harder way to come back would be finding a sponsor, And she said, I think my mom would love to help you. Let me present the case to you. And yeah, miraculously, those two people were a miracle in my life, and I hope I can keep paying it forward to the community here in Utah.
What is the work visa process like? Is it as screwed up as everybody makes it sound? Is it getting better?
It's not getting any better. So there are different kinds. The H-1 type of visa requires that you are very unique in your abilities, and that your company that is sponsoring you demonstrates that no other American has the same talents, or they don't have access to that type of talent at the moment, and therefore it's justified to bring you. There are others, like in my case, I was able to, after I came here as a student, with an F1 student visa. After I graduated, I stayed a year in what they call an OPT, optional practical training. That's a temporary work permit. During that year, I was able to meet my wife, and she grew up in Ohio, and she graduated from BYU. We had the same group of friends, and by then we already knew each other. So in 2002 we started dating, and 2003 we tied the knot. That means that in about 3 weeks, it's going to be 20 years of marriage.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That is no small feat, my friend. Well done. That's very cool. And you guys still live in Utah County?
No, we live in Sandy right now.
Okay, so close enough.
Yeah. Having said that, I have two sisters. One of them arrived here in Utah from Venezuela a month ago, and they live in Provo. And my wife Rachel, she has tons of family here in Utah County.
At what point did you start getting interested in being a community builder? Because when I think of you and our interactions over the years, you're a phenomenal community builder, and the work you do and your passion for it and the love that you show as you're doing it it's contagious. It's really cool.
Appreciate it.
At what point were you like, I'm going to do that?
I think that so after my first year of marriage, Rachel and I decided to move to Jersey so I could go get my master's. So I went to Seton Hall University, get my master's in diplomacy and international relations, and that opened that expanded my university even further. I was able to work in the United Nations and briefly in Wall Street and get exposed to a lot of things. And at that very moment, my wife was offered a very good position back in Utah. And after discussed it with a higher power, we decided to move back to the state. That implied that I was going to start from scratch. And when we arrived here, I felt a bit at a loss. And what people told me is like, well, there is a Hispanic Chamber of Commerce here and a Latin American Chamber of Commerce. And there is actually a group of Latino professionals that might be able to help you out. So I immediately contacted a gentleman who works right now in Blue Cross. His name is Miguel Rovira. He's a Puerto Rican gentleman who really, without any type of considerations, he just talked to me and told me different options and invited me to participate in community events that involve Latinos. That in itself was a first for me, because the concept of a Latino community was something that I had reserved only for Spanish-speaking congregations of my church. Other than that, that concept of community had not been present.
Interesting.
And after I started interacting with the business community among the Latino people in Utah, I felt that's sort of a commitment, because I saw talent and I saw brilliant people and people with good moral values that just wanted to fulfill the American dream, to be honest. And so I felt like just like I had that commitment to paying forward, I wanted to do that with my own people, So I started teaching entrepreneurial courses in the community, and that in itself evolved into an interest to integrate my people into the innovation/technology ecosystem. And when I saw Silicon Slopes starting in 2012, that rang all sorts of bells inside me. Like, wow, that something like that is what it's needed here. I wonder if I could make a connection. And so when you guys started, I should say when we started having events in Silicon Slopes, I participated as much as I could. And starting in 2016, I realized that technology is a very good way to bring people out of poverty if they take advantage of the opportunities, and actually the opportunities are there. So at the moment, I thought, well, here in Utah, there are not enough tech workers for the industry. We were trying to import them. And in the meantime, there is an entire contingent of Latino people that could be taking those jobs. because no one else is doing that.
Right.
So I started the Latino chapter eventually to try to integrate more people and to let them know, to let the Latino people on the one hand of potential opportunities in the tech sector, and to let the mainstream community that there is actually talent among my people.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm very passionate about that, as you know, and I hopefully my efforts translate into one day some sort of pipeline in which people with low economic resources have access to the education and skills they need, so they can integrate the tech ecosystem and the innovation ecosystem here.
Well, again, like my experience with you running the Silicon Slopes Latino chapter and just general everything else that you do, you're involved in so many incredible things, is your passion for it and the way that you stand up for your community, fight for your community, is, again, man, it's inspiring.
Thank you.
It's wonderful what you've done there, and I think you've made a huge difference, and you'll continue to make a huge difference.
Thank you.
Here's something I always wonder, like when it comes to community building, having kind of been in this game for a while now. It's like, and I don't know the answer to it, right? Because we've created chapters and different segments within Silicon Slopes, and we also have kind of like the broader thing. But I always worry, like, hey, does it make sense for us to section certain groups of the community off, whether it's the Latino chapter, whether it's the Python developers, whether it's the marketing chapter, all that type of stuff, right? And so they're meeting with their peers, they're meeting with people who are like them, they're meeting with friends, it feels comfortable, all that type of stuff. But does it prohibit, this is the question I always ask myself, is like, does it prohibit more of an integration into the community? Okay. Where they're more engaged and involved and understand kind of what's more broadly happening. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's the case for unity, as in which is important. It should be a goal. When I talked to Garrett about the possibility of starting the Latino chapter, he told me that the origin of that is actually several UX designers or programmers that wanted to have that bonding common and start learning from each other from their craft, you will, And so they started that, and they exchanged information. I don't know what the status is right now for those communities. In my case, I am not a technologist. I'm someone who comes from the business and the arts background. And I wanted to inform people about Silicon Slopes, but there is a social aspect or social integration aspect, and in the Latin American culture is very complex, and it's not a monolith. And one of the tenets that we like is that, hey, you want to be part of us? Bienvenido, welcome. Just don't eat all the chips, okay? So Latinos come in all colors and sizes.
Sure.
So it is very valid to make sure that we keep a tone that is not divisive but actually inviting. And big shout out for Mateo Munoz, who is currently the head of the board of directors of the Latino chapter. I passed the torch, and I have I gather a good team of entrepreneurial and technological minded people, and they being invited. To be honest, none of us have that mentality as like, this is our thing, and no one else come you're closer. Actually, the more the merrier, And well, we both know that there's a lot of people here in Utah that have lived in Latin America for different reasons. Either they range from religious to professional to even vacation, or retirement. So I want to bank on that empathy that a lot of people here already feel for my people, and ride that wave and make sure that we can create some synergies in the meantime.
I'll tell you, like, I just ripped off the idea of chapters from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Really?
I was like, how did they do it? Because the Silicon Slopes was getting big, and, membership or whatever that means, because, we don't pay any fees or anything like that. But if you're part of technology, we want you to be part of Silicon Slopes. And as it started gaining momentum and more people wanted to be a part of everything we were doing, I'm like, how do you organize this? And then I'm like, well, there's this church here in the state who's done a pretty good job. They have wards. We obviously can't call them wards, so let's call them chapters. And then we did regions, which is like, hey, St. George and
That's
Southern
right.
Utah.
Eastern Utah.
Yeah, Eastern Utah. And those are like stakes, right? Which is
well, but for those who don't know, that's the equivalent of a parish and diocese in the Catholic Church or
it's
other
like a number
Christian
of
denominations. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And so that was my idea behind it. I don't know how well it's doing. We've built some really interesting technology that we've released lately that I think will make it a little bit easier for autonomy through chapters. I really want them to be autonomous. I want them to be able to work together to, all the various things, but it's difficult.
Yeah. Well, for instance, I still feel that our chapter is unique in its purpose, which is specifically trying to integrate people into the Silicon Slopes ecosystem. And that can have many different ways to look at, from the entrepreneurial way to education, to work, to skills building. And that has been the challenge. And I started weeks before COVID appeared in the world. So our events for a year and a half or 2 years were everything on Zoom.
Yeah.
And that brought that was an advantage in itself, because for our events we had people joining from Costa Rica, Venezuela, Argentina, Chile, and that in itself was letting people know that Utah is a place of opportunity. And that there are Latinos here who actually made it, if you will. And on the other hand, by now we know that human warmth or feeling of company, that feeling of community is felt better when we are present. When
in person's just there's something really magical about in person. And, going from doing events every single day at Silicon Slopes in person, all that type of stuff, to like having to figure out how to keep the community together when none of us could actually be together physically.
Exactly.
That was fascinating.
And well, technology did help us bridge those distances, and and again we're able to connect us with people around the world, and 10-15 years ago that was not possible, and so technology that we have today, for Gen Xers like me, we had seen only in sci-fi movies or the Jetsons or something like that. But, and it's interesting how those very things that we saw in cartoons and sci-fi shows are now what we're living. One aspect that I wanted to let people know, or especially Latinos, is that we have the capacity, the cultural capacity to create. Some people had made the case that what we like in culture is being more disciplined. That might be a bit of an exaggeration. I think that we can always work more on that, but creativity-wise, we've been able to come up with a lot of solutions. One of the guests in my podcast, InnoLatino, her name is Lina Mendoza. I call her one of my leadership comadres. So, and she said, those pyramids in Central America weren't built by themselves. That capacity to build and to come up with solid science to establish solid foundations for the future, that is innate in us. We just need to rediscover it. And there are people that have come up with very great discoveries. Some of us, or if not most of your listeners, viewers actually.
Sure.
And they can see us because a Mexican invented 3 different types of video capabilities. You know, and his name was Guillermo González Camarena, from Mexico City. But we don't talk about that a whole lot, even in our own culture.
Interesting.
I forgot her name, but it was a Latina who came up with. We gave them the main. We discovered or gave the. Sorry, I'm thinking in Spanish. Aportes, and it's like one of the main participations that she in giving the COVID vaccine. Was a Mexican American lady from Pfizer, and just like that, there have been several figures that have contributed to what the technology that we live with today. So innovation can come from very varied spaces and from very different circumstances and moments in our lives. So one of the things I do in my newsletter and my podcast is trying to invite people to develop enough empathy to see where opportunities are to make humanity better, to be honest. And that can be moments that might seem very ridiculous. The Swiss gentleman who came up with this, Velcro, actually was walking his dog and noticed that there were, seeds of plants sticking to the dog's fur, and then I thought, oh, this might have some good uses, and obviously it took a lot of trial and error, but eventually it came out with that name and that product. Velcro, from French velour, coton, and it's being used even by astronauts, or by rescue workers and by law enforcement. So there are very small things that have made a difference, and they can come from very small moments. But if we have enough empathy to think that maybe this can help people, we can make great discoveries, and it doesn't have to be a Nobel Prize type of discovery. It can just be a different way to approach our team, different way to do things in our company, different way to communicate the message, and to make things easier for everybody. That's what I think.
Now, here's a question I have for you. Obviously, Utah has a bit of a reputation as like being a little bit closed off, hard to get into various communities, whether it's true or not, just kind of like closed-minded, all these types of things. Like that's my sense of like the perception. I don't know if that's actually true. But my question to you is like, how could Utah improve in being seen and actually being more welcoming and open and accessible?
I think that Utah is already becoming more accessible, and I already gave you an example of a Utah who, without questions, gave me her support so I could get an education, and now it's my turn to give back. I've seen both sides of the spectrum, but mostly people who actually like to meet new people and new cultures. And I think that, to be honest, the people who are close-minded and just unwelcoming are in the minority, to be honest.
Yeah.
At least that has been my experience. There have been ideas and prejudices that I think that had been more popular because of political pundits than anything else. Because I think that, well, this is still a good place to raise a family, to start a business, to create a new version of you that is going to help the world. That has been my experience.
What about from the elected official standpoint? Not to make this like a political, but are they helpful, hurtful, sixes?
Well, the majority across the political spectrum are people who believe in diversity. And when I have conversations with them, they have no qualms in telling that we need that in our state. There is a small group of politicians who are turning, not only in Utah, in the entire nation, diversity concepts like diversity, equity, and inclusion. They're turning into a 4-letter word, and it is sad and also sometimes unnerving that they use words of people like Martin Luther King to justify their actions. My thought is that if we are intentional in becoming more diverse and having diversity of thought, of race, even sexual orientation, and we're just going to be more rich in our experiences. I'm not asking for anyone to compromise their religious belief or moral code.
Yeah, sure.
But I think that it's a very Christian thing to be accepting and friendly to everyone and to learn from each other, to be honest.
Yeah, I think that the challenge with those 3 words that you just said is everybody kind of defines them differently.
Yeah.
Right? Like I think the people who would be like anti-diversity, inclusion, and equity would have very different definitions than you have for those 3 words.
Yeah.
So it might be useful actually for you to go through and define these words so we I think so many times we talk past each other, right? And we're talking about the same words, but we have completely different definitions, experiences, and all that type of stuff. So maybe we start with like diversity. What do you, in your mind, like what does diversity mean to you? How would you define that in this context?
Yeah, it's embracing differences pretty much, and that difference can be from gender to way of thinking as well. But also being intentional in inviting people that have a different perspective than us. Now, the case against diversity is that that term diversity hire is it's something noxious and not good. And diversity doesn't mean that quality of work and talent is going to be diminished. It's actually that people who are qualified can be hired and should be hired. And one of the merits for that person to be hired is that they can bring a totally different perspective and therefore help our organization move forward or grow in many different instances.
Right.
Regarding equity,
I think this is the most controversial one. I think equity is super controversial.
It is. Equity and equality are not the same thing. Equality is that everyone is the same, and obviously people can relate that to communism and things like that. Things that as a Venezuelan, I'm not.
Well, my sense of it is like equality is like equality of opportunity, right? Like everybody has the same opportunities. How do we achieve that goal? And I think people who are against like the word equity, they see it as like everybody gets the same outcome. You know what I mean? I think that's how I don't know. I'm not an expert. You would know.
Well, no. You're that is exactly how I define equity. Not everyone starts in the same. Not everyone has the same opportunity. Period. And there are people in disadvantage from different backgrounds and factors, socioeconomical, racial, cultural as well. Sometimes in our own diverse communities, we shoot ourselves in the foot. But let's talk about Utah, for example. Latino communities are the greatest ethnic group after white, after Caucasian,
You mean percentage-wise?
Percentage-wise.
Oh, yeah. And it's only growing, right?
Yeah, exactly. And yet, in leadership and professional positions, we're not there.
Right.
That was one of my motivations to engage in this type of work. having said that, again, it doesn't mean that people are going to just hire people for being Latino. No, we hire talent because they're qualified, and if they're gonna be Latino, okay, what kind of perspective can you bring to our organization?
Mm-hmm.
Similarly, there are people in disadvantage in our rural communities, and a big shout out to Joel McKay Smith, who works closely with them.
He's so great.
He's awesome, man.
Yeah.
And these are comprised of white mainly, and Native American and Latino, especially Mexican people, and they are falling behind.
Mm-hmm.
They with all these advances in technologies and how our economy in the state is evolving. Unfortunately, there are many communities, rural communities, in which the following generations they don't know exactly where they're gonna go, and there might be populations or entire communities that are just going to die off, and we don't want that. So that's part of diversity and equity. Those people who do not have a voice in the table or opportunities like we've had in this ecosystem, how can we include them as well? And that's where inclusion comes in. It's being intentional on going out there and see, okay, who is here, who should be here, and who in our community does not have the advantages, opportunities, resources that I've got. Okay, is there a way to bring them in? How? And it's a matter of being intentional, being empathetic, and be mindful of the best way that we can contribute as well. I come from a background of international relations / humanitarian aid. That was my specialization. And sometimes with very good intentions, we can ruin a community's economy,
For sure.
But so just because we think we know better of how to help a certain community or a certain country, how about we ask people what they need or what they go through, and then include them and say, okay, this is how I can help.
Yeah.
Can we work together? Okay, fine.
Yeah.
And that's a concept I have of DEI. Furthermore, a couple of days ago was 4th of July here, and I can tell you that one of the happiest days of my life is when I became an American citizen. I was sworn in Capitol Theater in Salt Lake City. The judge who presided the ceremony was Judge Alba, who was a cropper, and became not only a lawyer and an attorney, but a judge, And so that day, I also, the materials they gave me, saw that brilliant people like Albert Einstein or Sergei Rachmaninoff, they were immigrants like me, And pretentious as it sounds, it made me feel like I'm part of the same group, I'm being welcomed, So that whole concept of a pluribus unum, out of many, one, that's what to me it means to be American, That is the American experience. So whether it's Latino, Native American, African American, Asian American, those are part of the American experience. And a lot of people say, well, we should stop having African American Month or Hispanic Heritage Month. I think that eventually we'll need to, but in the meantime, we need to make sure that these different experiences are part of the American experience, are part of our nation, our country, our culture, and that there is nothing wrong with include those perspectives in our history. And I must say, I think that Utah has been receiving to refugees, political asylees, and my people as well. People don't know, but this has become a big Venezuelan community as well.
Yeah.
So that is another dimension of Utah, that it was created literally by refugees, by the definition
That's
of
exactly
refugees.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
People who cross borders because this was Mexico before, this was another country. They were fleeing religious persecution, they had been killed. And and they started a new life here in a desert, you know. And these are the values that we need to remember in our state, and remember that whether it was Latter-day Saints or not, this was built by people who were persecuted. You know, this state was established by people who, whether they were Native Americans or they were, you know, immigrants from Europe. It was with people that were in need, you know, and they were fleeing persecution and fleeing sometimes financial distress, you know. And just because of that, we need to keep that sentiment alive and that enough empathy to say, okay, I am here and I have these opportunities because refugees and my ancestors came and they were giving opportunities. You know, let's make sure that we don't close the door behind us.
I like that, particularly like we're pioneers. You know, like sometimes I think we shy away from that because we think about like the bonnet hats or like but no, being a pioneer is awesome.
I agree, and I think that we can be pioneers if we engage in innovation and if we have courage to adopt that good cause, you know, and or to even if it's just trying to bring our family into a better situation. That's how life is, you know. You're stepping into the unknown. That's being a pioneer, and that's something I included in my newsletter, InnoLatino. That is, pioneer is kind of an attitude as well. You know?
For
it's
sure.
Giving one step after another, and sometimes in despair, sometimes in depression and sadness. But nonetheless, by the very fact of you giving that step, it's courage, man.
Yeah,
it's courage.
I agree with what you said. You said something really interesting there around good intentions, and sometimes good intentions can lead to negative results, which is really interesting. But I agree with you that, or I believe that the vast majority of people have good intentions.
Yeah.
Right. And it is fascinating, like how good intentions can go awry, even like when good people are behind them. But your intentions are pure, and everything that you have done has been good. I want to talk about, before we end here, your podcast, your newsletter, which you've mentioned a couple times, and what you talk about there and how people can subscribe and what led you to do that.
Thank you. So after I left the field of law enforcement, and I wanted to reinvent myself and give them. I knew I had a voice that I wanted to get out there in society. So I wanted to. I started thinking, okay, what are the things that I'm fascinated about? You know, and it came down to three. You know, innovation, diversity, and most of all, leadership. You know, and I think that those are things that any person can benefit from, you know. And so as I mentioned, my dad was a musician and he was a singer. Tomorrow is going to be a year since he passed away.
I'm so sorry.
Thank you. He had a beautiful voice, you know, and he also sang commercial jingles and he worked in dubbing. And my sisters and my siblings and I worked doing dubbing sometimes in Spanish growing up in Venezuela. So we're very familiar with the studio. You know? So I knew I wanted to do something with my voice. When COVID hit, I knew if I don't do it now, it's never going to happen. So, okay, I know that I want to talk about these three things: innovation, diversity, and leadership. Okay, innovation, and also from the perspective of a Latino immigrant. So innovation, Latino. Okay, InnoLatino, InnoLatino. So that's how it started. And I was intentional in looking for people with diverse backgrounds that would have something inspiring to say. Because I knew that they inspired me, they were going to inspire my listeners as well. So I've had people from Hollywood actors and directors to people that are working in NASA or have worked in NASA as well, you know, and all of them have something positive that they can contribute with, you know, and I'm very careful with inviting people who are just talking about themselves and their experience. I like to invite people who actually have something to give. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
you know that is like it's not about me. It's actually about us.
Yeah.
You know, so I've been intentional in that. I've been picky with my
That's good. That's
with
great.
my guests. You know, but I think that my intent has been that every single episode would inspire my listener. You know, so in InnoLatino Podcast. By the same token, I had such great guests and such great concepts that I started learning from them, and I thought, okay, this is worth being read. You know, so the transcripts of those interviews, I created material from it. So I started in a newsletter on LinkedIn. So it's InnoLatino newsletter, InnoLatino newsletter, and I don't charge for. I don't charge for anything.
That's awesome.
And so if you're on LinkedIn, you can subscribe to my newsletter. If any content creators out there, LinkedIn's newsletter is really easy to do, and they get directly to the email of people, of your followers. So it's a very well kept secret that it's a secret weapon, you know. So cool. It's only worked miracles for me, and because I feel that I'm reaching to the heart and minds of people, you know.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Thank
you so much for coming on.
Thank
you for everything you've done for the state of Utah. It's a pleasure to have known you for this long, and you know, been friends, and to watch you build and grow and be the leader you are. So thank you so much.
No, thank you, Clint, and thank you for what you represent and for being a voice of our state to the world. So thank you.
Thank you, brother. Okay.